There is a saying that life can only be understood backwards, but it must be lived forwards. However, if you were given the chance to go back to your younger days and you wanted to prevent a future event from taking place, would you be able to do it? How would your involvement in the past affect the future? What about the butterfly effect? How would you know that the new future is going to be better? For better or worse, the story of Takemichi Hanagi is the answer to those ideas. The year is 2017. He's 26 years old, just lying around in his apartment, eating snacks and watching TV when a news report talks about two civilians who recently died because of the Tokyo Manji gang. Those two civilians were Hinata Tachibana and her younger brother, Naoto Tachibana. He gets a little sentimental because Hinata was his girlfriend from middle school, the only girl he's ever dated, but life didn't even give him a break to be properly sad. He has to apologize to the neighbor because his TV was too loud, and then to his manager at the part-time job because he forgot the DVDs, and then to a stranger because some kids scratched the stranger's car and left, so he had to take the blame. There's nothing remotely exciting about his life. All he does is apologize. Plus, he's still a virgin at 26, so maybe evolving into a wizard is his only salvation. Then, as he's standing by the railway waiting for the train, regretting his life choices, someone pushes him from behind. He ends up on the railway track, and moments before getting hit, he remembers Hinata one last time. Though as fate would have it, the next time he opens his eyes, he's inside the train, getting told by a few friends to hurry it up. They're his friends from middle school, namely Makoko, Yamagishi, Atsushi, and Takuya. He's a little confused by all this, especially when he looks in the mirror and sees this lame-ass middle schooler instead of himself. Then he checks his phone and finally realizes what's going on. It's July 4th, 2005. He's now 12 years back in the past. Takemichi goes with his friends to a fast food restaurant where they talk about his cousin, who's a big deal in the middle school gang world. He himself is a little confused about what they're talking about, and this is where it is revealed that they're going to fight the second-year students of their school today. Soon they're on their way to the spot, but Takemichi realizes that he hasn't fought in about 10 years. This could get a little ugly, and it does, especially when he begins to recall more details. The second years didn't come. Instead, it's the third years. Not only that, Takemichi's cousin is actually their errand boy. Big mistake. The boys had made a big mistake. They proceed to beat the absolute living life out of the boys. No mercy whatsoever, and before leaving, they tell Takemichi and the others that they're now errand boys of the Tokyo Manji gang. Takemichi knows that this is the point where his life turned for the worst, and he ultimately had to relocate. The memories begin to get the better of him, so he decides to see Hinata. The man begins to cry and leaves shortly after, though then in the park he notices a little boy getting bullied. Since he was already in a bad mood, he makes them pee their pants with sheer intimidation and saves the little boy. It turns out that this little boy is Hinata's younger brother, Naoto Tachibana. Takemichi ends up saying too much, like what's going to happen in the future, and how if he wants his sister to stay alive, he must remember the date July 1st, 2017. That's the day they die. In the wake of this moment, he shakes Naoto's hand and immediately appears back in the future. He's on a hospital bed, wondering if all of it was a dream, but then Naoto appears dressed in a suit. He reveals that the future changed thanks to the information he gave him 12 years ago. He worked hard and became a police detective, but although he's still alive, he couldn't save his sister. That is right, the pursuit to save Hinata and change the future has only just begun. In the past few years, Naoto has learned a lot about Tokyo Manji gang, and also about time travel. He states that Takemichi has the power to go back exactly 12 years in the past. For the next 2 days, Naoto gives him all sorts of information that he wants him to remember. It's important information that his predecessor died to get, and the crux of all of it is that Takemichi must remember the two names Manjiro Sano and Tera Kisaki, saying that if these two had never met, the current Tokyo Manji gang wouldn't exist. If they wish to change the future, they must keep these two from getting close. Takemichi then asks Naoto about how exactly he's going to go back in time, and Naoto reveals that the handshake is the trigger. So they shake hands, and Takemichi is once again a middle schooler. but he doesn't wake up to anything pleasant or youthful at all. Rather, he's in the middle of a fight, getting punched and knocked unconscious. He wakes up again and is still there. The one that beat him up was Masataka. He's the one who beat them all up before, and in the original timeline, Takemichi spent his middle school life being his slave. Now he's running a fight club, where if you don't perform, you get more beatings as a punishment. They're finally going to leave when Takemichi summons the courage to ask if they know anything about Manjiro or Teta. He'd like to meet one of them. This causes Masataka to get irrationally angry. He picks up a bat and tells him that if he mentions Manjiro's name again, he's literally going to die. This scares our boy so much that he's already at Hinata's place, ready to shake her brother's hand to go back to the future. Hinata opens the door and gets worried because he's all beaten up again. The two of them share a wholesome moment, which makes him realize that he must protect this woman at all costs. The following day, Takemichi's in the bathroom with the boys, all scared of Masataka, but ready to switch places for each other if need be. They're all pretty cool. However, when the fight club begins and his friend is fighting someone strong, Takemichi steps in and asks Masataka to fight him, as a king versus a slave. Has a nice ring to it. Takemichi was being bold. He knew that he can't save anyone if he continues to be weak, but the difference in power was too much. Masataka absolutely slays him. It was hard to watch, so much so that his friend Atsushi brings out a knife, fully intent on sneakily stabbing Masataka. But seeing Takemichi's courage stops him from doing anything foolish. Takemichi simply declares that unless he's killed, he will keep getting up. Conveniently, two personalities show up. Their presence causes all the members of the gang to bow down. It's Ken Ryuji, aka Draken, and with him is Sano Manjiro. Draken is the vice commander, while Manjiro is the leader of the Tokyo Manji gang. Masataka tries to say a word, but gets kicked by Draken. Looks like he isn't nearly as important as he thought he is. Manjiro, on the other hand, asks for Takemichi's name, and then declares that from this day onward, Takemichi is his friend. And this just leaves everyone lost for words. He then does to Masataka what Masataka was doing to Takemichi. It was punishment for running a fight club under their noses. The next morning, Manjiro pulls up to Takemichi's school to see him, but Hinata sort of misunderstands the situation. She thinks Manjiro is the one who's been beating him up these past few days, so she slaps him. She slaps Manjiro for the sake of Takemichi. Darren doesn't like this, but Takemichi steps up for the girl. In the end, the misunderstanding is cleared up. Hinata apologizes, and Takemichi then goes on with Manjiro and Draken. They ride bikes and enjoy the wind. Things seemed alright at that time, but Takemichi didn't know that he had just passed by Kisaki Teta on the road. When the day is over, Takemichi feels as though Manjiro isn't the type of guy who'd kill Hinata in the future, so he wonders what exactly changes things so much. Now, while Takemichi is enjoying his time with Hinata, there are some fireworks outside. They go out to the roof to enjoy, and he kinda tries to reach for her hand, but accidentally grabs her brother's hand instead, and this causes him to return to the present. You bet that Naoto isn't very pleased that Takemichi's return to the present was this random. As long as he'll be in the present, time will continue to flow in the past. If he spends a week here, a week will have passed back in the new timeline as well, which means that their fate is now in the hands of his young and naive self, until he gets back. Anyway, maybe things have changed now that he's become friends with the literal Sano Manjiro. He also mentions that Manjiro can't be evil. He's too much of a Chad to be evil. So they decide to see Manjiro, and to that end, they meet Atsushi. He's the one who's going to stab Masataka to save Takemichi, but thanks to Manjiro and Draken, he never had to. The good news is that Atsushi is now part of the Tokyo Manji gang's upper echelon. Maybe he can get them in touch with Manjiro. Atsushi seems kinda worn out. Takemichi jokes around that he must have a lot of money considering his position in the gang, but he replies that there are things which money can't buy. He goes on to say that it was him who pushed Takemichi onto the railway track, though of course Naoto then saved him, almost as if he knew it would happen. This causes Atsushi to blow our minds by deducing that there's time travel involved. Good. Takemichi's having a hard time processing all this, but Atsushi keeps dropping bombs. He explains that he's now basically Kisaki Teta's soldier. He just carries out orders. As for Manjiro, he changed. They haven't seen him in years. He had changed the day Draken died. Atsushi then tells Takemichi to go back in the past and save everyone. He says this and then jumps off the roof, effectively killing himself. This gives Takemichi a newfound conviction to save everyone. He asks Naoto to look into Draken's death and also Kisaki Teta, because it's him who ruined everything. While Takemichi realizes that he has been fired, Naoto looks into Draken's death. He died on August 3rd, 2005. There was a big gang fight, during which he was stabbed to death. Saving Draken is crucial to saving the future, and so Takemichi shakes Naoto's hand with the intention to make sure nothing happens to Draken. Though the next moment he opens his eyes, there's a half-naked beauty right on top of him. He runs away and is found by Hinata. There's an awkward moment because he doesn't want her finding out about all this. Anyway, Draken informs him to come to the shrine because there's a gathering, and Hinata decides to tag along. Once there, Draken tells him that this is no place for girls. He then calls a girl and asks her to protect Hinata if need be, since she is Takemichi's girlfriend. Takemichi's taken aback because it's that girl from before. The situation immediately complicates when she mentions how Takemichi made her undress until she was just in her underwear and then ran away. Hinata very obviously doesn't like this, she beats him up and leaves. As for that girl, her name is Emma, and she doesn't really care about Takemichi. She just wanted Draken to get jealous or something like that. Okay, so the meeting begins. Manjiro states that their gang will be fighting a rival gang, Mobius, on August 3rd, so I guess it's Mobin time. Their mother did something heinous to a friend of the 3rd Division captain named Pa Chin. He beat him up, did his girlfriend right in front of him, and also assaulted his family. No joke. This is serious, and the entire gang is ready for war. Later, when Manjiro, Draken, and Takemichi are hanging around, they go to the hospital to see Pa Chin's friend's girl. She's been unconscious for 5 days. Her parents, understandably, call Manjiro all sorts of slurs, but he bows down and apologizes. The reason he can act so sophisticatedly is because he has Draken on his side. There's a flashback which reveals that Draken was born in a brothel. He never knew who his father was, and his mother abandoned him. He used to be made fun of and ordered around by the big bullies, and this led him to finding Manjiro. Manjiro liked Draken, and they started hanging out with each other, and have been best buds ever since. Takemichi then goes back to the present and meets Nobutaka together with Naoto. He's the former commander of the gang called Mobius, and the one who did what he did to Pa Chin's buddy. Right now, the man is timid and weak construction worker who can't finish his sentence without apologizing. He answers Takemichi and Naoto and explains that the event was manipulated by someone else. He was a pawn in the game, and Draken's death was simply a means to an end for that person. Realizing this, Takemichi returns to the past and braces himself to tell Manjiro, nicknamed Mikey, that there's a greater game involved in all of this. He wants Mikey to give up on the fight, but of course Mikey would never do that considering what the gang did to their friend. Before long, the leader of Mobius, Nobutaka, shows up with his men, and it's about to go down. He hits Takemichi. Pa Chin steps up with a desire to fight Nobutaka all by himself, and Manjiro tells the rest to just watch. Sure, Pa Chin gets defeated, but he doesn't lose. Manjiro knocks Nobutaka with a single kick and tells everyone that as long as he's with them, they will never lose. In his final attempt, Nobutaka tries to attack them with a broken bottle, but Draken easily stops him. And that's it. Mobius lost. Draken declares that they will now be under the Tokyo Manji gang from here on out since the members had lost their will to fight. Takemichi knows from his knowledge of the future that this fight was going to lead to something big, but he's surprised to see everything getting resolved so easily. Only that wasn't the case. Pa Chin then pops up again and stabs Nobutaka Osanai. He apologized to Manjiro while everyone runs because the police soundtrack was already here. Takemichi passes out while running. He soon wakes up, but in a hospital, and with Emma. She mentions that Draken and Manjiro are fighting, which gives Takemichi an extremely bad feeling. Then back at home, he starts solving a puzzle to distract himself from the truth when his friends show up and talk about how the gang is not looking good. Conveniently, Draken also shows up at his house. He has a watermelon. He tells Takemichi how Nobutaka didn't die, which means Pa Chin only has to serve 1 year in prison. When Takemichi asks him about Manjiro, he gets a little angry, destroys his puzzle, and states that they're done. Toman is splitting. Draken was about to leave, but Manjiro was here. Apparently both of them came to see Takemichi, and the situation isn't nearly as bad as he thought. The two of them still fight though, and also end up breaking plenty of Takemichi's stuff. He eventually gets angry and tells them to stop like he should have 10 minutes ago, though they run away when Takemichi falls into a trash can and emerges back with poop on his head. Fortunately, it doesn't look like Draken and Mikey are still fighting, which is good. Takemichi then goes on a date with Hinata to the summer festival on the promised day, which is August 3rd, the day Draken dies. He has a lot of fun. Sadly, right as he's attempting a kiss, his phone rings, and he's told that Draken is in danger. He immediately has to leave his date with Hinata and go assess the situation. Although he might have assumed a little too much of himself, a few gang members find him and bring him to Masataka, who's now planning on killing Draken. Not just because of his personal bad blood, but also because the members of Mobius are coercing him into it. Masataka enjoys beating Takemichi. He also tapes our boy's mouth with tape and leaves him on the ground. and that don't feel too good. Fortunately, Hinata finds him, she removes, he starts crying and talks about how he wasn't able to save anyone, but when she gives him her first kiss ever, Takemichi evolves into a better man. He's ready to intervene. Takemichi soon comes across Takashi, who fills him in on what's going on. Meanwhile, somewhere else, there's Pachin's buddy, who just found Draken with Emma. Takemichi goes there with Takashi because he knows that's the point where Draken dies. They witness Draken fighting a number of guys from Mobius. Manjiro also arrives. He's seen through the ploy of whoever's pulling the strings, but he's stopped by a man named Shuji Hanma, who's the replacement leader for Mobius. Things weren't looking too good for the gang since they were outnumbered. The rest of the gang quickly arrives as well, though. Now, Pachin's buddy, Panyan, tries to fight Manjiro, fully knowing that he can never beat the man, but he's still upset that they just let Pachin get arrested. However, Manjiro doesn't engage with him and tries to make him understand that he's also upset about what happened to Pachin. As this is going on, Takemichi is desperately trying to find Draken, and he does. But by that point, Draken has already been stabbed. He's lying on the ground, bleeding. It was Masataka who did it. Manjiro really wanted to reach for Draken, but he's stopped by Shuji, which leaves him with no choice but to entrust the situation to Takemichi since, as it appears, Draken is still alive. Takemichi, Emma, and Hinata quickly call for an ambulance, but it was going to take time which they didn't have, as Masataka and a few others had already surrounded them. Left with no other options, Takemichi braces himself to do whatever it takes to protect Draken, Emma, and of course Hinata. His hand is stabbed, but he doesn't stop. He persists and finally somehow manages to knock Masataka unconscious by choking him out. Takemichi's own friends appear. They are no match as well, but they're able to buy some time. Soon the ambulance arrives, which causes the members of Mobius to flee. Ultimately, the Tokyo Manji gang defeats Mobius, but then there's Hanma and Manjiro. He reveals the creation of the gang alliance called Valhalla before leaving. Draken, on the other hand, is being rushed to the hospital. He thanks Takemichi for saving his life. Then there's an operation in the ICU, and thankfully, it's a success. In the wake of the recent events, everyone in the gang recognizes Takemichi as a legend. Draken and Mikey also give him a uniform. It's Mikey's own uniform from back when the gang was formed. As days continue to pass, rumors start flying around about his contribution in the fight, and well, let's just say that they make Takemichi appear stronger than he is. Anyway, after enjoying the fame, he sees Hinata one last time, gifts her a necklace, and heads back to the future after shaking Naoto's hand. When he returns to the future, he's still at his old job, but when he looks for Naoto's number in his contacts, he can't find anything. Instead, there's a notification from Atsushi, who's now working at a salon. Takemichi meets him there and realizes that things have indeed changed, especially when Naoto reaches him through an unknown number and tells him that Hinata is indeed alive. Naoto takes him to go see Hinata, who's now an elementary school teacher. He isn't prepared to see her though. Unlike her, he's still a loser, so he tries to leave. But when he bumps into her, she immediately gives him a big hug. The three of them spend a little time in her apartment, but things are as awkward as they can get, and so they're on the road in the car. Naoto has to leave because of an emergency call, which leaves the two of them alone. They talk about the past, shared memories, but she also mentions how the person she loved dumped him on Christmas Eve. Takemichi has no idea that it was him. He still naively thinks that Hinata is the one who dumped him, and not the other way around. Once he realizes this, he wonders what happened after he left the situation to his younger self. Anyway, he goes to the bathroom where he meets Hanma Shuji, who is a little disappointed that he isn't in the car. This prompts Takemichi to run back to the car. Unfortunately, what he sees next is the car getting slammed into by a van. The one who was driving that van is Atsushi. Hinata was now moments away from death. Her life was fading away. He wants to get her out of the car, but he can't. Her lower body was destroyed. Plus, the car is soon going to explode, just like how Atsushi's van exploded. Takemichi doesn't care. He tells Hinata how much he loves her. She's glad to hear that, but since it was all going to explode, she pushes him away. Then, as he witnesses the raging fire in front of him, Takemichi swears. He gives an oath that no matter what it takes, no matter how many attempts it takes, he will eventually reach a future where she is alive. Doesn't matter if he has to become the top member of the Tokyo Manji gang to reach that goal. He will do it. Then there's a funeral for Hinata. Plenty of tears, and I mean a lot of tears. Hinata's mother gives Takemichi that necklace. She tells him that it was her daughter's favorite necklace. Takemichi and Naoto then talk about Atsushi and why he killed Hinata. Apparently, he also had a family in this future. His family was probably held hostage, which is what prompted him to this suicide mission. This makes them realize that Draken's death wasn't the primary factor in why the future went so wrong. Takemichi once again affirms that he must become the top dog in the gang. The two of them then look into Draken's current life. He's on death row, so they go and meet him. Draken is surprised to see Takemichi, and during their conversation, he reveals that his only regret is not killing Kisaki Teda. He's the reason things went so horribly wrong. Kisaki's actively trying to take everything from Manjiro, which is why Draken also advises Takemichi to leave Tokyo as soon as he can. After this conversation, Takemichi braces himself to go back to the past. He'll become the captain of the 3rd Division and gradually reach the top. He'll make sure that Kisaki is defeated. Back in the past, he opens his eyes to both Mikey and Draken fighting in the bath. Things seem alright again. Though when they leave the bathhouse, Mikey tells him that they're about to nominate a new 3rd Division captain. Of course, everyone is curious. Could it be that it's Takemichi? Well, no. In fact, it might be the worst nomination of all time because the candidate is a member of Mobius named Kisaki Teda. That's right, it's the devil himself. Takemichi doesn't like this at all. He punches Kisaki and makes a big scene. Everyone is angry at him for basically disrespecting Manjiro's decision. The 1st Division captain, named Kisuki Baji, confronts him for it, but Mikey then asks him what he's doing here. Apparently, he isn't welcome. Baji ends up quitting Toman and decides that he will be joining Valhalla. This creates a ruckus. As for Takemichi, he's punched by Kisaki in the face as payback. When he wakes up, Mickey's next to him. He starts begging him to drop Teda, but Mickey then reveals the story of back when he founded Toman, Tokyo Manji Gang. It was him, Draken, Takashi, Pachin, and Kaisuke. During the story, Mickey ends up asking Takemichi to bring Kaisuke back to Toman since he really likes the guy. Takemichi obliges, but also asks that if he follows through with it, he wants Mickey to kick Teda out. And it's a deal. However, he must be quick. He needs to prove that he's actually more useful than Kisaki Teda. Following this, Takemichi becomes an official member. He's right under Takashi in the 2nd Division. Then, as he's wondering why Kaisuke Baji left, he finds a charm on the ground with a phone inside. It has a photo of all Toman's founding members, but there's also a 6th member, which he hasn't yet even met or heard about. Conveniently enough, he doesn't have to wait to see this 6th member. He shows up to his classroom and Takemichi is discussing delinquents stuff with the boys. He takes him to Valhalla's hideout. Once there, he witnesses Kaisuke Baji beating the absolute living daylights out of his former vice captain from Toman. It is a test of loyalty that he has to do if he wants to join Valhalla. They then notice Takemichi, and it looks like everyone wants him dead. But he was only brought here to witness Kaisuke Baki's test of loyalty. He's also asked about what Baji said at the latest Toman meeting. He mentions that it was about him leaving Toman and joining Valhalla. After this, Takemichi brings himself to ask Baji about the reason why he left Toman, especially since he's a founding member. This is where Takemichi realizes that it's the guy from the photo. Baji then goes on to explain why he has such a hatred for Toman. It happened in the summer of the year of 2003, which is basically 2 years ago. He and Kozutaro were 12 years old at that time. They were having fun with Manjiro and the others in this new gang they had created, but since Manjiro didn't have a fast bike, they would sometimes get laughed at for it. At one particular instance, they got in trouble with an older gang, but Manjiro took care of the situation as always. However, this causes Baji and Kazutora to think about getting Manjiro a new bike for his birthday. Though since they didn't have any money, Kazutora sort of coerces Baji into stealing one. Baji didn't want to do it because Manjiro wouldn't like a stolen bike, but what if he never learns about the truth? So they break into the shop and begin to unshackle the bike. Coincidentally, the shop owner notices that someone's robbing the shop. He approaches to see who it is, but just as Kaisuke realizes that the owner of the shop is Shinichiro, Kazutora hits the man on the head with a weapon. Baji hesitantly tells Kozutaro that this man is Manjiro's older brother. They panic because Shinichiro is no longer breathing. The panic turns into a feeling of easiness so destructive that Kazutora concludes that since he did this for Manjiro, it's Manjiro's fault. Manjiro arrives when the police are at the scene, and before he learns what happened, he sees Baji apologizing profusely while Kazutora is actively mumbling that he'll kill Manjiro. Kazutora was then sent off to juvie, but now that he's out, they're ready to kill Manjiro. Baji is given a Valhalla jacket, and Shuji Hanma then tells Takemichi that Toman and Valhalla will fight on October 31st. In an abandoned parking lot. That night, Takemichi understandably had a hard time going to sleep, though the next morning he meets a guy named Chifuyu, the vice captain of the 1st Division, who was violently beaten up by Baji. They then talk, and the man reveals that the only reason Baji joined Valhalla is because he wants to expose Kisaki for the demon he is. He's not a bad guy in all of this. Next, they meet Draken and Mickey at the graveyard, where Takemichi talks about Mickey's brother's death. Of course, Mickey and Draken both understand that it was an accident, but of course, Mickey's heart just isn't ready to accept it all. Following this, Chifuyu and Takemichi partner up to help Baji. They also go visit Nobutaka Osanai, who reveals that yes, it was Kisaki who manipulated the fight on August 3rd from behind the scenes. Hearing this firsthand, the two of them come to a not-so-unreasonable conclusion. The true leader of Valhalla is actually Kisaki Teda. Takemichi wanted to confirm this fact, so he goes to the present and meets Draken again. But Draken's answer to who is the true leader of Valhalla shocks him. It's not Kisaki. It's Mikey. It's Sano Manjiro. He goes on to reveal that the day of the bloody Halloween night, Manjiro lost it and went to the dark side. What happened is that during the war on October 31st, 2005, Baji was killed, and the one who killed him was Kazutora. This caused Manjiro to lose it. He ended up killing Kazutora out of pure anger and also got away with it thanks to Kisaki. That day, Toman was absorbed into Valhalla, and the new Tokyo Manji gang was created. Manjiro became the leader, and Kisaki Teda became the acting leader. Takemichi expresses his disbelief at the fact that young Mickey actually killed someone, but Draken makes him wonder a little. If someone killed his brother and then his friend, wouldn't he feel the same way as Mickey did back then? However, it's clear what Takemichi needs to do. He goes back in time with the intention of making sure that Baji doesn't die. He cries when Hinata gives him a present, and then a day before the war, he goes to Chifuyu to meet Baji. Sure enough, Baji doesn't reveal the fact that he's actually on their side. When Takemichi tells him not to die, he tells him that far from it. He's planning on killing Manjiro tomorrow after all. There's a meeting between the members of Toman where Manjiro declares that even though he never shows any mercy to a traitor, their objective for tomorrow's war is to bring Baji back. He asks Draken if he's failed as a leader, but Draken simply replies that the applause begs to differ. Finally, the day of the war arrives. There are quite a lot of gangsters who come from other regions to observe as well. One of them was going to serve as the referee. He was getting a little cocky about it, but Kazutora knocks him out cold before the war begins. And that takes care of that. Anyway, it begins. Toman members are outnumbered against the overwhelming force of Valhalla. Shuji Hama confronts Draken, while Kazutora is ready to take on Manjiro by himself. Things weren't looking too good for Toman. Their might was slowly withering away. That is until Takemichi steps up and provokes them to attack him with everything they've got. His intensity spreads to the other weaker members as well, and this allows Draken to go on the offensive since he now doesn't have to worry about them. As for Manjiro, he's caught up in a trap where Valhalla captain jumps him. Looks like he isn't going to be one-on-one with Kazutora. They eventually manage to restrain Manjiro. He couldn't move well because they were on a pile of cars, and this gives Kazutora an opportunity to hit him on the head with a pipe. Manjiro falls and Kazutora rejoices. He won. But despite the bleeding, Manjiro seems unfazed. He asks Kazutora if he's his enemy, and Kazutora affirms. It's revealed that Kazutora didn't have a pleasant past. He was abused by his father, which gave him a pretty twisted perspective on what makes one a hero. He thinks that since Manjiro is his enemy, if he kills him, he'll be a hero. However, while they continue to attack Manjiro, even with a pipe, he asks Kazutora another question. Did he kill his brother because he was also an enemy? Of course, there was no satisfactory answer, and then in the blink of an eye, Manjiro destroys the two others who were attacking his back, and then pulverizes Kazutora with a single kick. It was like a planned assassination, but he did embrace too many violent blows, and this causes him to ultimately pass out from exhaustion. Takemichi tries to go save him, but Kisaki Teda comes with his division. He protects Manjiro from a Valhalla captain and reassures everyone. Nobody knows his true colors except Takemichi, Baji, and Chifuyu. Takemichi wants to do something, but Baji acts before. He tries to jump Kisaki, but gets held back by Takemichi. Though, just as Takemichi realizes that it was Kazutora who killed Baji, Baji gets stabbed. And yes, it is indeed Kazutora. Be that as it may, Baji tells Takemichi that this wound is nothing, and still tries to make his way to Kisaki. He was this close, he almost had it, but the wound was indeed fatal, because the next thing you know, Baji stumbles. He falls to his knees and begins to spit up blood. It wasn't looking good for him. In the wake of this, Manjiro declares that the war is over. The alleged leader of Valhalla, Shuji Hanma, thinks he's relevant because he tells Manjiro that this isn't something he can decide on his own. But before he could properly finish that sentence, he's already been completely destroyed by Manjiro. Once again, like an assassination. Blink and you would have missed the fight. The members of Valhalla cower in fear. They begin to run away after seeing just a mere fraction of Manjiro's power. Manjiro then approaches Kazutora with the intention to kill. Seeing this makes Takemichi realize that things are going to turn out exactly as Draken said in the future, especially since Kazutora seems like he already accepted his death. But Baji then steps up and reassures Kazutora that he won't die. Or to be more precise, he won't die by his hands. Baji takes the knife and stabs himself. He was now in his final moments. During this, he tells Takemichi that the reason why Manjiro let Teda join is because he promised to get Pachin out of jail. He tells Takemichi that he'll be leaving Miki and Toman in his hands, and then Baji dies in the hands of his loyal vice commander, Chifuyu. Guys, a moment of silence for you to drop an F for respects in the comments section in honor of our dead friend, Kisuke Baji. Anyway, Manjiro was still going to kill Kazutora. It felt inevitable. But since Baji asked Takemichi to take care of Manjiro, he comes between them. Manjiro doesn't stop. He punches Takemichi and then kicks him when he tries to say that Baji didn't want this. Though as fate would have it, Baji's charm falls from Takemichi's jacket. Manjiro picks it up and recalls the time when Toman was created. His eyes are dead, but at least this made him recall something pleasant. He starts to recall their early days, how the reason they founded this gang was because Kazutora got in some trouble with black dragons, so they needed to protect him. Manjiro realizes that Baji wants him to forgive Kazutora, and later, when the police arrive, Kazutora apologizes to Manjiro for everything and decides to stay behind with Baji's body. He's ready for whatever punishment that's given to him. Following this, Chifuyu visits Baji's grave and remembers the story of back when they first met and became friends. How Baji saved him from this gang back when he was full of himself. As for Takemichi, he visits Kazutora in the juvie with Draken, where it's revealed that Kazutora will be serving 10 years in prison. Draken shares with him Manjiro's message, which states that he's forgiven him and that he's still a member of Toman. Next, Draken expresses his gratitude to Takemichi for stopping Manjiro from killing Kazutora after taking him to a place, which was actually a brothel. But Draken was born and raised here, so it's his home. Though when he leaves this place, he notices Emma hugging Miki and telling him that she loves him. This makes him panic because what would happen if Draken saw this scene? But what he doesn't know is that Emma and Miki are half-siblings. Takemichi then receives a call from Takashi Mitsuya. He's the captain of the 2nd Division, of which Takemichi himself is a part of, and he surprises him with an official jacket he made for himself. Outside of the founding members, Takemichi is the only one who receives this. He wears it to the next gang meeting where Manjiro shows up with the former acting leader of Valhalla, Shuji Hanma, and Chifuyu. An important announcement is about to take place. You bet not many are feeling so excited after seeing Hanma, but he reveals that from here on out, Valhalla will be under the Tokyo Manji gang. He also goes on to state that the credit to bringing the two gangs together goes to Kisaki Teda. Now, as Takemichi is shaking in his boots, Manjiro then lets Chifuyu talk to the gang. He states that his plan was to leave the gang, but because he didn't want to let the fire of the 1st Division fade away, he has chosen to remain here. And as for the next captain of the 1st Division, he calls out to Takemichi to take the position as the captain of the 1st Division. He adds that this is what Baji would have wanted. Of course, Takemichi accepts. His goal was to get to the top of the gang in order to prevent the countless tragedies that are going to happen in the future. After this, he goes back to the past to get spoiled. And his situation this time around is more surprising than he could have imagined. He's no longer working at that DVD rental shop. Instead, he's the owner. When he comes outside, there's a car waiting for him and all. People are calling him boss, and he has a luxury apartment all to himself. He meets Chifuyu, who is waiting for him at his apartment, and he's told that the upper echelon of the Tokyo Manji gang is about to have a meeting. They have to go. Takemichi is the top executive of the gang after all. Once there, he sees a lot of people he doesn't know, but also some that he has seen in the past. Anyway, the intention of the meeting is to weed out a traitor. Kisaki Teda then appears as if the main character, and everyone bows to him to affirm that idea. He asks Takemichi and Chifuyu for a private moment. They go to a different room where Teda reveals that he was the one who manipulated everything on the bloody Halloween. He states that it was never his goal to kill Baji, and so he apologizes to Chifuyu. Though he also mentions that it's completely fine that they want to continue hating him, and offers them a drink. When they're drinking, he says that he actually lied. It was definitely his goal to use Kazutora to kill Baji, and he succeeded. As for Takemichi and Chifuyu, they begin to lose consciousness. Yeah, there was something in that drink. When they wake up, they've been tied to a chair. He starts kicking Chifuyu and tells him to confess that he's the traitor, and Chifuyu does admit that he is the traitor. He wants to weed Teda out of Toman after all, but he also mentions that unlike him, Takemichi doesn't have anything to do with the situation. But Teda is about as paranoid as one can get. He shoots Takemichi in the leg just because Takemichi was acting a little surprised. The man turns the gun to Chifuyu's head. He's about to pull the trigger. Chifuyu uses his final moment to tell Takemichi that it's been years since Manjiro disappeared, and that Draken has already been executed. He tells Takemichi that he's leaving Baji's feelings and Toman in his care, and gets shot in the head that very moment. He's dead. Takemichi begins to cry, and this enrages Teda. With tears in his eyes, he points the gun at Takemichi and says goodbye. Just before pulling the trigger, he refers to Takemichi as his hero. And what? That's it. This is the point in the story where the first season ends, but it appears that Takemichi still has a long road ahead if he plans on saving everyone, now that he's been shot with a bullet. And that's the end of the video. As always, if you liked what you saw, subscribe to the channel. I'll be uploading a lot of videos just like this, so I'll see you at the next one.